Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
You're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the new generation took over the WWF. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
We don't really have any content to work with here this week, new stuff at least, so I guess, hello?
What? Who are you? Joe Gimateo.
Hello?
What a maneuver there! Sorry, my mic cut out there for a second.
That was the Jarrett match, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cut out the first words back. What a maneuver there!
Yeah. I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history 1 year at a time. That's right, folks. This is the final episode of 1995. This is the 95 year in review spectacular. And to just give you a brief taint tickle of what we've got coming up in our episode, we're going to kick it off with match of the year candidates, those being the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels versus Double J Jeff Jarrett for the Intercontinental title from In Your House 2. Followed up by Razor Ramon versus the Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title in a ladder match at SummerSlam. After that, Ryan's going to give us the Jobber of the Year selections. Joe has Observer Awards. We're going to talk about our highlights and lowlights of 95 and what we are looking forward to in 1996. What do you think, guys? Are you ready to put a nail in this coffin?
I can't wait.
Yeah. Never been more ready for anything in my life.
It's been a long and trying year, but we've come to the end, god damn it. All right. Well, gentlemen, let's get into it. First up, the most important segment, at least that's what I tell myself, and this year, it kind of reflects the year that we're coming out of, 1995. In past years, we've had multiple matches. This year, we've got two. Two fucking matches made it to Match of the Year contendership. And the first one, Shawn Michaels defeats Jeff Jarrett with the roadie by pinfall to win the WWF Intercontinental Championship in 20 minutes and 1 second. This match gets going with clear feelings from the Nashville crowd about both competitors, and immediately from the get-go, this match launches with some heel aggression from Jarrett, a shove into a corner followed by a stiff punch, and that is automatically, reflexively returned by Shawn Michaels, but this just has a little bit of extra oomph to it as Jarrett sells the hit back across the ring. Jarrett cowers in the corner, begging the referee to intervene. The arm drag takedown and strut from Double J in the next sequence helps to build that heat layer by layer. These opening sequences here in the beginning are the layers of brick and mortar being laid down as the foundation of this match. Get the crowd hot early and then keep them with you. I would point out to anyone out there listening to pay close attention to the little things, like selling simple punches in this match. At this point in the match, there hasn't been anything too complex yet, but the action has been immaculately worked, and these punches and reactions from both wrestlers are looking very good. One of the things that makes Jeff Jarrett such an effective wrestler is just how vocal he is. Double J is talking while he's working, and it's both extremely entertaining and appropriate for what he's doing. He's adapting his words to what's going on in the ring. He's bitching about getting his hair pulled while systematically denying that he's doing anything heelish in the least bit. After a headlock, Shawn breaks the hold and hits Jarrett with an eye poke. Again, not the most technical thing in the world, but the way that it is executed is flawless, both in the delivery and the selling from Jarrett. The way that Jarrett stumbles when he whiffs the clothesline, the way that Michaels does his lift up off the ropes and straight up into the mocking strut. This is already a masterclass in performance. Case in point, as Double J threatens to walk out, drawing the count out, Shawn Michaels throws his arm over the referee's shoulder, getting the crowd fully invested in the count out. There is nary a single participant in the audience that is not counting along with the referee. And when Double J does decide to return to the ring, he does so only to roll in and out to stop the count, drawing even more heat. Then repeats the tactic. The crowd is audibly booing Double J and equally excited when Shawn Michaels forcefully brings Double J back into the ring. Both competitors have an amazing awareness of their space and the location of the hard camera. This is highlighted when a perfect series of rope work ends with Shawn Michaels slingshotting Double J over the ropes and onto the roadie, and the crowd loved it, and we had an eagle-eye perfect view for all of it. That's followed up by a splash from the top turnbuckle onto Double J and the roadie at the outside. The crowd engagement is maintained through another series between the corners, ending with Shawn Michaels going over the top rope to land damn near flat on his back out on the floor. The physical assault on Shawn Michaels gets geared up now. Headshots off the stairs, an especially ugly powerbomb, an abdominal stretch aided by the roadie, and then a DDT reversal. These all have the crowd getting more and more concerned about Shawn Michaels. After another sequence, Michaels sells himself over the top rope in the corner again, ragdolling himself to the outside. Something else that I've noticed as this match has gone on is just how quickly and fluidly these guys are getting up off the mat for each other. It is absolutely seamless. They go from flat on their back to being maneuvered in some maneuvers very quickly. Even the interference from the roadie in various spots looked good. The real test of audience engagement happens then as Double J puts a headlock on Shawn Michaels so Shawn can feed off the crowd energy and fuel that comeback. The crowd obliges. They are putty in the hands of both Michaels and Jarrett as the comeback culminates in a back body drop reversal on Jarrett that leaves both men laying on the mat. The Michaels rally gets going in earnest now, with reversal after reversal, popping the crowd's asses off as he takes the upper hand. The crowd hangs on every single 2 count and groans at every kick out. We get treated to dueling crotch hits, one on Double J as he lays in the corner, then one on Michaels as the roadie shakes the ropes during a top turnbuckle setup. Then, on an attempted figure 4, the official gets knocked out as some extra work from Double J and the roadie go after Shawn's knee. This sets up a fantastic-looking flying body press from Jarrett onto Shawn, and a great pop from the crowd as Michaels kicks out. Some subtle interference from the roadie then sets up the finish, tripping up Double J and putting everyone into position perfectly for the sweet chin music, the pin, the 3 count, and a new Intercontinental Champion. Gentlemen, that's our first candidate for Match of the Year. As I stated earlier in my breakdown, I feel that this match was a masterclass in performance. For the most part, the work was great, both competitors giving their all and making the work look effortless, but the way that they were able to work the crowd gave us an amazing example of ring psychology. Joseph, please, I want to hear what you have to say about this match.
To start off, the entrances, I forgot how great that this roadie promo was. He comes out and takes the mic and introduces Double J. And keep in mind, up to this point, we didn't really hear a lot from the roadie. So this was sort of something different, and it's kind of showing signs of what he would do later on in front of Attitude Era crowds. He kind of showed that same charisma, and I really enjoyed that. All I was thinking here was, at the very beginning of the match, just please take me back to July. Take me back to before those 95 Marines beat up Shawn Michaels.
Oh my
Take me
gosh.
back to before Vince was tickling our taints with retirement talk of Shawn Michaels. Just a much better time period for Shawn Michaels in general. So that was nice to go back to this time period in July. Classic storytelling and psychology to start this match. Bartlett, you mentioned a lot of that in your recap. many of these Shawn Michaels matches start out this way during his entire career. Even the second half of his career, he was always great at telling that story inside the ring. And you also mentioned these guys know exactly which cameras to turn to. They know what's going on in that ring as they're working, which really takes a lot of skill, I'm sure. And Jeff Jarrett's not too bad himself. So, doing all of that stalling to avoid the countouts, that type of stuff, really getting the crowd into it. Just really great psychology from both of these guys. And I think this is the match where Jeff Jarrett and the Roadie walked out on the company after, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, even with that happening, Jeff Jarrett was still able to work and do his job. Shawn Michaels does a dive to the outside at one point to land on both guys. And for me, this was just perfect by all three of the performers. And some of these shithead wrestlers that do this nowadays, they should probably watch this and take note, because it was absolute perfection from all three guys. Just perfect.
And you don't need to have a dozen guys catch someone.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard to say anything that I would dislike about this match. I guess if I really had to choose, I would say I didn't like Earl Hebner kicking the Roadie. There was a lot of interference from the Roadie, first off. There was a lot. And I don't know that I really like that. Earl Hebner should have just kicked the Roadie out. He should have just said, hey, you're out of here, like he did with Diesel at WrestleMania 10. But, then they did that trip up at the end that was just confusing. It's almost like Shawn Michaels got a little bit of a tainted win there, which I didn't like either. But again, that's totally nitpicking. There's nothing to really dislike about this match.
I don't know about you guys, but once I realized that, got into it and saw what match this was, I had to even watch Double J's singing of "With Your Baby Tonight." I had to start from there, because there's a lot of great things there, like you guys both mentioned, just setting up the storytelling of this match. It begins a match before it, this setup of him singing. And I always love Vince reminding us that tomorrow night, "With Your Baby Tonight" will be available on cassette tape. That's always great to hear. I also forgot, up until watching it, the point that you just talked about, Joe, that this was the point where the Roadie and Double J end up saying fuck you to McMahon and the WWF and just leave. Like, literally tonight they leave. And it doesn't show in the match, though, not by any means, because this is it's a classic. And you already talked about the Roadie's promo, but right before that, we got a promo from Shawn Michaels, and he had a couple good lines in there. Especially, I love calling Double J Goldilocks. I think that is just phenomenal. But he did fuck up the WWF name, so that was kind of funny. Him and Petting Zoo kind of have a couple laughs about that, but the Goldilocks line was worth it. But then the match, what can you say? These are just two guys that they go down as legends, and, rightfully so. One of my favorite things out of 95 in general is that cocky move from Shawn Michaels at the beginning, where he grabs the belt and uses it as a mirror and then hands it back to the ref. I don't know. There's just something special, just an extra prickish taste to that he does, that it just, even though he's the baby face, it works for him for sure. The other thing I really like about this match is, these two guys, I guess you would call like classic middleweights, and to me, that is what an Intercontinental Championship match should be. It should be two middleweights like this. They just fast pace. They take a break maybe once or twice a match to catch a breath for 30 seconds. But other than that, it is balls to the wall for almost 20 minutes. And they do not disappoint in the least in this match. Even the trip up thing, if I put my mind back to the ending where the Roadie trips up Double J, I was excited to see where this feud would go. I thought, here's the end of Roadie. We're going to see him wrestle a little bit more. But then the bringer of death, Joe, slapped us back to earth and told us, no, they're hitting the bricks after this match. So that's unfortunate, but that doesn't go against this match at all. You can't bring the hindsight of what happens after to the performance these two guys gave us. And You were saying, what would you change? About the only thing I could think of to change in this match is I really wish it was JR instead of Vince.
Yeah.
Because if I hear he got him, no, he didn't get him, one more time in this match, I was going to just jab my ears out. I mean, it was just so many times he said it. But like you said, that's nitpicking, we can't change commentary. But if JR was here, it would have made it just that much better. In the end, we even got Barry Dudensky hawking those beautiful Shawn Michaels heart glasses that Joe wants.
Yes.
So, just from beginning to end, just entertainment. Just great stuff.
Yeah, agreed on all points. And this match literally had everything possible going for it. The guys are the same size. There are no huge stylistic differences between them. They've both been in the business at about the same length of time. They're both the same level of professional. And, to that point, I'm sure that going into this match, Double J and the Roadie knew what they were about to do. And they were, like you've both said, they were that professional about the situation that they still gave this match their all, knowing that they were going to wind up in Jerry Jarrett's hot tub later on that night.
Right.
Just such solid professionalism. And the thing that I couldn't get over was that this wasn't a highly technical match, but just the way that they worked it. This is almost felt like a remnant of the Territory days, the last gasp of that kind of crowd working that sadly we haven't really seen since, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was just such a clear case of a baby face that is just completely over, and a heel that could get the entire audience to boo him.
Yeah.
Just a perfect clash of the two coming together. And, this is what you want to see in a wrestling match.
Absolutely. So now that we've talked about our first contender for Match of the Year, let's go now to the second Match of the Year contender. Shawn Michaels defeats Razor Ramon in a ladder match to retain the WWF Intercontinental Championship in 24 minutes and 58 seconds. The match gets going with some talk, followed by a shove and a punch, then some of the fastest rope work I have ever seen Razor Ramon do, ending with Razor holding onto the ropes and making Shawn Michaels whiff on the sweet chin music. This gets an immediate reaction from the crowd in appreciation. Another quick sequence happens, this time ending with Shawn Michaels reversing out of the Razor's edge, prompting Razor to gesture as if, well, you tried it, you can't blame me for trying too. Razor twists in some wrist holds and gives some great-looking shoulder hits into Michaels. This is ended with Shawn being whipped to the corner and ragdolling up and over. No wonder Shawn Michaels developed a painkiller addiction. We've said this many times on the podcast. He certainly sacrifices himself for us, the viewers. Razor then heads out to the entryway to pick up the ladder, but Michaels is quickly on him, running and jumping onto Razor's back and taking him down to the concrete right in front of the ladder. Michaels then takes Razor back to the ring and tries to suplex Razor over the ropes into the ring. This doesn't work out though, as Razor reverses with a suplex of his own. Michaels going up and over to the outside and smacking the back of his foot and ankle off the metal guardrails as he falls, drawing an audible "oh" from the crowd. Everybody there either saw or heard it. As Michaels is crawling up the entryway, Razor hits him with a running elbow drop. I don't even know if there's a different phrase to call it, but just something so simple looked so fucking great at the same time. It looked rough. It looked devastating, but it was just an elbow drop. It was an amazing thing to watch. The action moves back into the ring then, with Razor getting Shawn up into the Razor's edge but unable to execute it as Shawn escapes down Razor's back and into position for another attempt at sweet chin music. But again, Razor ducks it and both competitors hit each other with matching clotheslines and both competitors go down to the mat. This was reversal followed by reversal, ending with double reversal. I hope we are starting to see the trend here. Razor is able to whip Michaels off the turnbuckle like a heart brother, and then a kick in the opposing corner leading into a back body drop that leaves Michaels down and Razor heading for the ladder. Finally now, after all of those taint teasers, Razor brings the ladder into the ring. Michaels attempts a baseball slide, but Razor dodges it. And once again, Michaels gets up to his feet at the outside, and Razor lights Shawn up with a punch that sends spit flying to the rafters. Once again lays Michaels out. This, too, draws an audible "oh" from the crowd. Razor Ramon makes the first climb for the ladder, only to be knocked off by Michaels. Michaels picks the ladder up, and in a possibly inadvertent baseball swing, takes Razor out with the ladder. Michaels then climbs the ladder. Razor is only able to get a hold of 2 ankles and then the ass of Michaels' pants before Shawn is able to kick him away. A brief exposure of the buttocks for the ladies, and Vince goes wild for that. Just as Michaels is almost up the ladder, though, Razor comes back and knocks the ladder over, Shawn's left knee getting caught up in it on the way down. This gives us the focus on Shawn's knee now, as Razor folds up Shawn's knee in the ladder and then proceeds to stomp the ladder. After this, Razor picks up Shawn's knee and slams it into the ladder, really working that joint, preventing the execution of the sweet chin music. And then this sequence bumps up a notch as Razor uses the ladder to sweep the legs out from under Shawn Michaels. Excellent use of the ladder there, in my opinion. But the carnage isn't over yet, as Razor hits Shawn with a scoop slam onto the ladder. Razor sets up the ladder horizontally in the corner, but as Razor works on Shawn's knee, Shawn is able to reverse with a kicking shove, sending Razor's recently injured ribs into the ladder. This doesn't slow Razor down much, though, as Razor grabs Shawn and gives him a lift that ends with Shawn's knee coming down on the ladder once again. This continues as Razor hits Shawn's knee off the ring apron, then the corner post. Michaels does give us a short rally with some punches to Razor, but Razor ultimately reverses with a drop toe hold that Razor moves into a nice-looking move designed to wrench and hyperflex that knee. Then Razor brings the ladder back in, casually tipping it over onto Shawn's knee as he is laying on the mat. The ladder now gets stood up in the center of the ring as the match begins to revolve around it. Attempts from both competitors to climb it, but never making it higher than the second or third rung. And then we get our first power move off the ladder, Shawn Michaels taking Razor down from about 3/4 of the way up with a belly-to-back suplex. Michaels folds the ladder vertically in the corner, and after a quick pair of reversals, whips Razor into it, then changes corners and whips Michaels into it again. Michaels then stands the ladder up, and from the top does a backflip onto Razor and rolling the landing into some quick rabbit punches on the mat. Michaels then goes back up the ladder to attempt a splash, but Razor reverses by rolling out, so Michaels can pancake on the mat from 10 feet in the air. Razor then recovers first, gets the ladder open and up in the center of the ring. Both competitors start to climb both sides of the ladder. They both make the top at the same time and start trading punches across the ladder's peak. And in some kind of attempt at a knock off the ladder, it goes awry and the ladder goes down, spilling both wrestlers. Michaels getting crotched on the top rope and Razor going through the ropes and to the floor outside. Then a second ladder gets brought into the mix. We now have both ladders in the ring, and Michaels gets caught going up the opened ladder by Razor, instantly in the Razor's edge and taken to the mat. After both competitors start to recover there, both ladders get set up again right next to each other, and both competitors start climbing. At the top of each of their respective ladders, a small push and shove happens, but ends with Michaels able to give the sweet chin music across the ladder to Razor, putting Razor and his ladder down to the mat. Michaels then makes a leaping attempt from his ladder to get the belt from its hook, but misses and hits the mat. Razor is then up in time to attempt the Razor's edge again, but Shawn reverses it over the top rope and sends Razor to the floor outside. This gives Shawn time to set up a ladder that's more centered under the belt, climbing up and grabbing the belt, but unable to get it off the hook and falling to the mat again. Michaels sets up the ladder once again and starts to climb, this time getting his hands cleanly on the belt and getting it down, winning the match and retaining the Intercontinental Championship. So, gentlemen, while our first match of the year candidate gave us a masterclass on working a crowd and ring psychology, the latter match gives us a masterclass on what two excellent wrestlers can do with reversals and building stories around reversals. The first ladder match at WrestleMania 10 held the ladder up as the star, and to me it looked like both Razor and Shawn didn't want to lean on it again in this match, so they decided to take it up a notch with storytelling. After all, it only makes sense that a rematch would rely heavily on reversals. Ryan, what did you think of this match, please?
To start things out, I started up SummerSlam and I watched the intro to SummerSlam, and I forgot that this was the SummerSlam brought to you by Supersize Stridex pads. So that was exciting to see, and it was also exciting to see this SummerSlam was right in our old backyards. It was in Pittsburgh at the old Civic Arena. That's a place we've all been to many times, so that's exciting too. But to the match, it starts off with one of the best entrances ever, at least in recent memory. So the promo that Razor cuts is pretty decent, but then the camera doesn't cut. It just follows Razor from, I know we talked about it before, but the way that it just follows him from the promo right as he walks out the gate or out the entrance and down the ramp. It's just, we haven't seen anything like that before, and I thought it was a great visual, followed by a good entrance by Shawn. The way he comes in and he turns the ladder around and decides to walk the whole way up the ladder and down it, coming down the ramp, just two great entrances by these guys. They're just really sucking it up to the crowd, and great stuff. I also forgot all the troubles that the refs had with the belt, attaching it to the cord, cable, whatever. It took them forever. They had to readjust it a bunch of times, and then as we saw at the end, they put it on too tight. Shawn couldn't even get it off on his first attempt. But none of that matters because the match starts and it's an absolute classic from the beginning. The last match, Shawn Michaels displayed how great he could be against a similar sized and matched opponent. This one is a little bit different. This is him showing off what he could look like against a taller, heavier, stronger opponent. And, it could be argued it looks just as good. That's pretty clear by the fact that Shawn is involved in both of the match of the year candidates that we have. I mean, that really hammers home this guy's versatility in the ring and just what a fantastic wrestler this guy is. I mean, he gave us a good match against King Kong Bundy. I mean, what an amazing feat that is, right? And this was no different. This was amazing, and not just from him. Both guys did an absolute fantastic job, and as you said, just the way that they were reversing and reversing and reversing, and they all looked good. I got to give Shawn credit again in just his awareness. They wanted to do this, attack his knee angle, and how he was able to, in midair, snake his leg into the ladder as it's falling to make sure it got caught up in there. Just great job on his part. And I remember when we watched the second one, Joe, you brought up that they were told that they shouldn't use the ladder that much. They wanted to keep it maybe a little bit more kid-friendly. They didn't want them to do too much violence with it. But I thought they incorporated it very well. And this match and the original, they set the bar for all other wrestlers in the WWF for a ladder match to come. This second one, they were able to do this match on short notice, because if you guys remember, this was supposed to be against Sid, but Gorilla Monsoon decided that Sid wasn't worthy for a SummerSlam match and instead scratched it and decided to give us this repeat match that, the tried and true, they knew it was a success before, so let's give it to him again. So I really got to give them credit that they were able to, on such short notice and without really much build-up, put together a really great match. And then after the match, we got one of the best scenes of 1995 where Razor goes backstage and bitch slaps Dean Douglas to the ground. I mean, who could forget that? Just, fun stuff all around with this match.
Yeah, you mentioned the entrance for Razor, and we're going to talk about highlights of 1995, but kind of like I guess an honorable mention is that for production, these entrances that they did, this one with Razor, I think they did one with Bret Hart and Diesel later on as well. So that was, I guess, a small highlight of 1995. There's very few of them, but that would be one of them. And like you said, too, with Shawn's entrance was cool, too, because they did that silhouette thing where they dropped the curtain down for when he was coming out. That was pretty cool. And I forgot about the botched belt raising incident. That was just so bad.
That was half of the match.
They were so pissed. Like, Razor's like, fucking bring it back down. And, Shawn's saying, like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Bring it back down. But yeah, the match was very fast paced pretty much almost the entire time. I mean, there were some parts that kind of slowed down, but not really. But this match really tells the story of Shawn Michaels has to scratch and claw to beat Razor Ramon in this match because, Razor got the best of him in the last ladder match. So with this one, it's like, Shawn really has to dig down deep to beat Razor in a ladder match. And that's what happened. I think these guys were put under a lot of pressure because when you have a match like this again, everybody kind of expects the same thing, We talked about that recently with Bret Hart and British Bulldog, how they don't really have a story going into it. It's just sort of, hey, here's another ladder match with these guys. And with that, I think they did an amazing job. I think that they utilized the ladder as a weapon, but it wasn't, I guess, obvious this time. So the one thing that annoyed me about that is if that was true, that they didn't really want to use the ladder as a weapon, Vince should have probably said that. Like it was sort of like a cryptic thing that he kept saying, like, oh, I think you did that by accident. Like anytime they would hit each other with the ladder. So it was kind of annoying. Like we didn't know that. But again, nitpicking. They utilized the ladder very well. It was similar to what they did with the last match, but they used it in different ways. Like Razor Ramon was using it to go after Shawn Michaels' knee after he injures his knee, and just a couple other things. I don't understand the purpose of the two ladders. I understand it from an entertainment standpoint, but I don't get it from a strategy standpoint. Like, why was Razor pulling out that second ladder? There was nothing wrong with the first one, so... And that was a little confusing. And there were a few errors in this match that you could tell. I know that the guys probably wish they could have it back, but any other two guys, like let's say Marty Jannetty or like Isaac Yankem, I don't know that they would have corrected it as well, Yeah.
I think that's a guarantee, right?
They were able to overcome those errors and still deliver an amazing match. And Shawn Michaels, again, with a couple nice spots off the top of the ladder. He does a moonsault, which was pretty good. He did a dive off the ladder, off the very top, which that was pretty amazing. And one thing that I want to point out, too, is the commentary. So we get Doc Hendricks on this one with Vince McMahon. And Doc Hendricks, after the moonsault, Shawn Michaels doesn't go for the pin. Then he goes back up to the top of the ladder and misses. And Doc says he should have gone for it when he had the chance, Vinnie Mac. And that's the kind of shit that I want out of a commentator. Like, that smart talk that he gives us sometimes. And that was good. Nothing against Jerry Lawler, but I think that it was nice to have Doc Hendricks here as sort of a change of pace. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. It was really surprising to me that they were able to make this match just as good as the first one. I do think the first one was better, but if someone told me they thought this was better, I would not argue with them.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think I feel the same way about it. Personally, I prefer ladder match 1, but if somebody were to toss this into the discussion, I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, it'd be hard to argue with them.
Yeah. The thing that really got me about this is how every turn and ebb and flow of moves and sequences in this match all hinged around a reversal. And that's the thing that just jumped out to me over and over again. And after the first 2 or 3 times of it happening, I started to pay more attention to it. And yeah, it really felt like this entire match was just reversal after reversal and trying to one-up each other after a reversal, because you already know what the other guy's going to try. We've been here, we've done this. And it just felt like it added an extra little layer to the storytelling and to the action here. But this begs the question of where we fall in our votes. So, if each of you would like to give your votes, Ryan, why don't you go first?
This was definitely a tough one. I mean, these are two phenomenal matches here, but in the end, I'm going to have to go with the Shawn Michaels Double J match from In Your House 2. You know, mostly it's the little things, the setup for it. The storytelling in this one was just a little bit stronger. The fact that we had so many aspects of this pay-per-view leading up to the match, with Double J doing his live singing of With My Baby Tonight and the roadie getting involved. The fact that it was actually set up, you know, months in advance. We gave credit to Razor and Michaels for what a great show they put on in that ladder match on such short notice, and they did. But in the end, it did hurt it a little bit. This match was thrown at us as a repeat out of nowhere, where the match with Double J and Shawn Michaels, it felt organic and just, I was involved much more than I was in the ladder match. You know, wrestling in both, you know, that's a crapshoot. You know, both of the wrestling in this, just phenomenal work by everyone involved. So the wrestling's tough, but for me, it came down to just the prolonged storyline that made me pick that match over the ladder match.
So going into this, I did not have a favorite. I remembered the two matches pretty well, but I didn't have one that going in that I thought, okay, I'm definitely going to go with this one. So after watching them both again, it's really a tough decision. It's really similar to last year, but I went with the Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels match, mostly because I just like the story of Shawn having to really, you know, Shawn Michaels is probably the best wrestler in 1995 in the WWF. And this match to me was sort of showing him like, man, he's really got to dig down deep. Like I said in my recap, he's got to dig down deep to really work hard to beat Razor Ramon. And that was probably one of the only times that we saw him really have to do that in 1995. I think that he sort of handled Double J a little bit easier, even with all of that interference with the roadie. I think that was maybe the one thing that kind of gave the ladder match the edge for me, was that there was a lot of interference from the roadie, and we never really got to see that payoff. The mistake that the roadie made was tripping Double J instead. Like, Shawn Michaels didn't take out the roadie, or Earl Hebner didn't throw him out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I went with the other match. I think that the overall storytelling in the ring was better, but by a very slim margin.
Yeah, that is a great point. And I really don't enjoy being in the tiebreaker position here, because as we've mentioned here in our discussion on these, there's nothing that you can take away from either of these matches that isn't just nitpicking.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Both were just immaculate examples of everything they could be. They had great workers. They had great work. They had the right kind of crowd interaction. They had just everything going for them that they possibly could. And they didn't waste those resources. They delivered on what they wanted to give us. For me, this comes down to one very simple fact, and that is one of these matches didn't have a gimmick. And I hate to say that because it makes it sound like I'm shitting on the ladder match as a gimmick, which I am not. There is a very good reason as to why the ladder match is one of the match of the year candidates. It was a phenomenal match. But when faced with virtually nothing wrong with either of them, I mean, again, you know, there were zero imperfections with both of these. It's going to have to come down to something as silly as the Double J match being gimmickless. It was a straight up babyface, heel, a little bit of interference and heel action on the heel side. Maybe not a clean win, but it felt that much more authentic to me and genuine to me, and I was more easily able to get into the ring psychology and get into the storytelling between the two competitors, rather than constantly getting hung up on, you know, oh my God, what are they going to do with the ladder next? And again, not that that's a bad thing, but just for my personal taste, my vote, and apparently the winner of Match of the Year, puts it at the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, and Double J, Jeff Jarrett from In Your House 2. Crazy year, 1995.
Yeah.
I really thought that we would end up with a third candidate at least.
We were hoping.
Yeah.
Yeah, just not a lot to choose from.
Definitely was a tough one, tough decision between these two, though. Nothing could be taken away from either of these matches.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a lot to choose from, but these two were easy.
Definite standouts.
Yeah.
Definite match of the year candidates, yeah.
Yeah, and what's kind of shitty about it is that we did have a couple matches where in watching them, like on Raw, we were like, this could potentially be a match of the year candidate. But then after a month of the storylines tanking, after a couple weeks of our wrestlers getting buried or new people coming in and getting too much of the push, there was just so much shitty booking going on in 1995 that any semi-questionable match of the year candidates were almost immediately forgotten, at least for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, now it is time. We've got our match of the year winner. Let's now go over to the chairman of the job board, the president of the Carpenters Union, Mr. Ryan Arico, for the jobber of the year.
Thank you, Bartlett. Jobber of the Year comes all the way back from the beginning of 1995, and that jobber is Mark Sciarra, or better known as Rip Rogers. Yes, there were some great jobbers to pick from this year, both Matt and Jeff Hardy. Rhino was a jobber this year, Balls Mahoney. But Rip's glorious white mane and just true jobber tendencies landed Rip Rogers the illustrious honors of Jobber of the Year. If you would like to hear a deep dive on Rip Rogers, he was covered in depth back on our February 20th, 1995 episode.
Yeah, and good old Rip, he's a trainer now, right?
Oh, yeah.
For a lot of very popular wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing that immediately comes to mind with old Rip is the episode where he was given the Jobber of the Week status there that you referenced, Ryan, and just how vocal he was with his selling. Getting hit in the face and just going,
Yeah, easy. This was an easy choice.
Oh,
too.
yeah, easy choice.
Unlike the match of the year, this was just a standout, easy choice.
Yeah, no brainer.
Hands
here.
down.
No brainer. Glorious looking motherfucker.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. Excellent. Love me some Rip Rogers. Thank you for that. And now, let's take it on over to Fletch, our man on the streets, our man on the inside, Mr. Joseph Giammatteo with Observer Awards. Joe, please.
My office is not nearly as messy as Dave Meltzer's.
Oh, man.
But thanks to Dave Meltzer and that messy office, I have some Observer Awards to announce for 1995 from the Wrestling Observer. The first award was Wrestler of the Year. If we had to pick a Wrestler of the Year in the WWF, who would you guys choose?
Whew.
Oh, man.
Of the year. You'd say Shawn Michaels because he was just in our 2 match of the year, but he also sat out so much of this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, the end of the year is a little rough for Shawn Michaels, I guess.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, maybe Bret Hart, but he didn't have anything too great this year.
This is just a random guess, but I'd say probably the Undertaker for the amount of stupid shit that he was willing to put up with and be a professional about. He sacrificed so much for the business in 1995. He asked
he
me
sure did.
It's a sympathy award.
Bartlett, calm down. We're not at the lowlights yet. Shawn Michaels was the only WWF wrestler to crack the top 5 for Wrestler of the Year.
Buddy Landau.
Came in. Shawn Michaels came in at number 2.
Number 2.
And number 1 was a Japanese wrestler named Mitsuhara Misawa, who I've never heard of.
Okay.
Sorry. I don't know much about Japanese wrestling. Now, I will tell you that the readers of The Observer in 1995 appear to be enormous ECW fans, and they absolutely despise WCW. So that's just a little disclaimer going into some of these other awards. The next award was Best Babyface. Shawn Michaels came in at number 3. Bret Hart came in at number 4. Best Heel. nobody in the WWF even cracked the top 10.
That makes sense.
So
Really?
that would show you, just how shitty the heel factory was in 1995. How about Feud of the Year, gentlemen? No feud from the WWF even cracked the top 10.
Again, makes sense.
It doesn't even feel like we had real feuds. We just had shit thrown at a wall.
Yeah.
Here's something else that won't surprise you. Tag Team of the Year. Absolutely nobody from the WWF, not even in the honorable mention.
How many tag matches did we have in 95? 3?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And 2 of them were fucking Yokozuna matches.
Yeah. Most improved wrestler. Absolutely nobody from the WWF. But I have to point out a couple things here. Diesel won this award last year in 1994.
Oh, that's interesting.
And this year for 1995, Johnny B. Bad was number 1.
Johnny B.
Mark
Bad.
Marrow. And I can tell you, watching some of these Nitros and these old WCW pay-per-views, Johnny B. Bad was having some fucking banger matches.
Really?
And he was starting off a lot of the pay-per-views. And they were some really good matches. So I'm not as surprised. Yeah. And obviously Mark Marrow is going to be coming in here real soon into the WWF.
Wonder how much of that has to do with his hot dog gun at the beginning of all of his matches, firing hot dogs out into the crowd.
Most unimproved. We cannot forget about Lex Luger. He came in at number 2. Diesel at number 3. And Psycho Sid at number 4. So they're cleaning house here with the most unimproved awards.
It's interesting that Diesel was most improved very shortly ago, and now he's least improved. So
most improved, and then he got his push.
Yeah.
Straight down the shitter.
I'll bet you guys can both guess this correctly. Who was number 1 on this category? The most charismatic.
Oh, God.
The most resilient.
Todd Petting Zoo.
Actually, it's Shawn Michaels, obviously, but Todd Petting Zoo, there was an award for most obnoxious, and Todd Petting Zoo only came in at like number 7 on that one.
What?
So, yeah. But Vince McMahon came in at number 5, so he beat Todd Petting Zoo.
Fair.
Here's a good one. Most underrated. Can you guys guess? A WWF wrestler was selected as number 1 most underrated. Can you guys even come up with a guess on that one?
Yeah, Savio Vega. That's
great guess, but no. The answer is Skip.
Oh.
Number 1 most underrated. Number 2 most underrated was Al Snow, who we saw briefly.
Well, not off of what we saw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Match of the year. There were no matches in the top 5 from WWF other than the Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon SummerSlam ladder match that came in at number 2.
Okay.
I wanted to point out that their ladder match from 94 was number 1 match of the year from the readers of the Observer. So at least we had that.
It's something.
Manager of the year, James E. Cornette, number 1. Jim Cornette has won this award every year since 1986. There was one year where Sensational Sherry won that award, which was 91, I think. But Jim Cornette pretty much wins this award every year, so not that surprising. Best TV announcer, even though we barely ever heard him, unless maybe he's doing Superstars or some other show. But Jim Ross came in at number 2.
Good.
Okay, yeah.
Best color commentator, Jerry Lawler came in at number 1.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good color commentary guy.
Let me remind you guys how much the readers of The Observer hated WCW in 1995. And rightfully so, because we had things like Dungeon of Doom and fucking Renegade and just a lot of stuff to hate. Worst wrestler of the year, Maybale, came in at number 6.
Oh.
Didn't even crack the top 5.
That's light.
Yes. Psycho Sid came in at number 7. Just to show you how bad WCW was, I guess. Worst match of the year. I know you guys would love to watch this match again. Maybale versus Yokozuna. That actually came in at number 2.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
What was worse than that?
There was apparently some Sting match in Japan that was voted number 1. He wrestled some Japanese wrestler that I've never heard of. And here's a nice reminder for you guys as well. The Royal Family versus Clowns R Us was number 1 worst match of 1994. So I know you remember that one very well.
Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Midget shit.
Worst feud of the year. Believe it or not, Undertaker versus Maybale was only number 5.
Jeez.
Best gimmick. Undertaker came in at number 3. And this is insane to me. So Undertaker has won this award since his debut in 1990. Every single year, he won Best Gimmick for the Observer readers. 1995, the Observer readers voted Disco Inferno as the number 1.
Man. Oh, my. Not Disco Stew.
Disco.
Oh, my God.
Last but not least, the worst gimmick. Can you guys guess who came in at number 1?
Man Mountain Rock.
Isaac Yankem.
Surprisingly, no. Gold Dust came in as number 1 worst gimmick. So the crowds are not, the readers are not taking kindly to Gold Dust yet.
Not enough ooze.
And that is all for the awards. And I guess we can talk about our highlights and lowlights of 95. I can kick us off here. I just want to point out that, you know,
low light heavy.
Low light heavy. We love doing this podcast. One thing that we want to point out here is that we have watched every fucking minute of this bad wrestling in 1995. Like, we didn't just go watch the pay-per-views or like watch 4 of the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
And we watched every Raw. We watched all the shitty build-ups. For me, I guess highlights there's very few. So for me, I think a highlight was a few legends that came in and debuted here. People like Goldust, Sonny, Ahmed Johnson. I'm probably missing a big one here, but those are probably the highlights, I think, of 95. It was really cool to go back and see that the Goldust debut was pretty flat, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And kind of the same thing with Sonny. I mean, she's obviously getting attention here and doing well, but it just kind of falls flat, I guess. And Ahmed Johnson and, well, a guy like Savio Vega, we saw him debut as well, not as Quang. And those were the complete opposite. Like, those guys got a lot of attention early, and that was cool to see. Lowlights for me, I'm just going to put, I mean, there's so many, but I'm going to point out 2 big ones for me. Number 1 was WrestleMania. WrestleMania 11 was just total trash. I mean, we thought that Nick Turturro was the best part. So that shows you how terrible the event was. And number 2 for me, for a low light, was it kind of branched off of WrestleMania, and that is the burial of Bam Bam Bigelow.
Oh, God.
That was just fucking horrible and just totally just mishandled big time, in my opinion. And those are my highlights and lowlights. Ryan, what did you think?
I'm going to start off with my lowlights here, and there were many in 95, but the 2 main ones that stuck out to me was, first, the continuation of giving The Undertaker just absolute garbage feuds. I mean, this has been something we've been dealing with back in 93 when we started with Mr. Hughes, and then Giant Gonzalez, and then Yokozuna, and then we move into Mabel and Mo. I mean, fuck me.
King Kong Bundy.
Yeah. The only decent feud he had was with Kama, and that was short, and that was with somebody who was hobbled by a shitty gimmick, which brings me into my second point. Shitty gimmicks that kill good wrestlers. Jean-Pierre Lafitte, Kama, Fatu. I mean, we have great wrestlers here who are just hobbled by terrible gimmicks. And then on the flip side of that, you have guys that are terrible wrestlers and terrible gimmicks being introduced. Man Mountain Rock, Mantar. I mean, these are sad times for the WWF. And as far as highlights go, they'll kind of highlight the low point that the WWF is at, because my highlight is the seeds that are starting to be planted of the Attitude Era. We have Sonny coming onto the scene, Goldust, Triple H, even though right now he's stuck up in this cartoon gimmick, but we still see great things coming out of him. We had that pay-per-view where Goldust debuted. It wasn't the best match, but the commentary from JR and the King just really gave us hints of some of the great stuff that we're going to see out of those two coming in the future. So the highlights were seeds that were being planted for things to come.
Yeah, I'm an idiot for missing Triple H. That's another big debut, 95. Which another one that his beginnings were kind of not really that great either.
No, I mean, but his wrestling, as we've already covered throughout this year, has been impeccable.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
On your point on the gimmicks, the terrible gimmicks, Savio Vega was proof that you can change that and it'll work. But they still insist on doing some of these terrible gimmicks.
Yeah. I think for me, the best way to roll my lowlights up into one convenient ball is to just peg it as creative. Creative is the lowlight of 1995, both in booking and in gimmicks and the way they are booking their gimmicks. It's like I mentioned earlier whenever we were discussing things, it doesn't even really feel like we had feuds. It doesn't feel like we had ongoing conflicts between two individuals or two stables or whatever it may be that mattered or that kept us engaged. It just felt like we were rehashing the old, and the things that were new were just things, again, that were thrown at the wall, and whatever stuck is what we went with. The booking was almost schizophrenic in 1995. We jumped around. We went back and forth. We had, all of a sudden, a casket is a good thing to get presented with. All of a sudden, we're going to forget all of these ins and outs of booking the Undertaker and Mabel and Kama and the Chain and the Urn, and we're going to juggle it back and forth. We're going to pick up Marty fucking Jannetty and push him. We're going to do all of these things that just make no goddamn sense, and they are not working, but we're going to keep beating them to death. And that's pretty much the story of 1995 in my eyes, is taking what little was left of 1994 and just wringing the life right out of it and then giving it a couple extra smacks for good measure.
You know, and I really think in hindsight, it's easy to see how much 1995 was a transition year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just, things were kind of getting mixed up in wrestling and the WWF in particular, and things are going to change very quickly, but definitely a weird transition period right now.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because it seems like it's like 1995 is the year where Vince McMahon maybe kind of started to realize, like, well, we're on a bit of a downslope here, and it's up to me to right the ship. It doesn't feel like he was trusting his talent as much as he might have in the past. You know, how much of a better 1995 could we have gotten if we maybe had Bret Hart throwing in extra ideas? Do you think Bret Hart would have really advocated to spend this much time in a feud with Jerry fucking Lawler, Isaac Yankem, and then Bob Backlund again?
Yeah, definitely not.
I don't think so, you know, and, you know, Bret Hart's knowledge of the business and storytelling and booking, I'm not saying he's the best out there or anything, but you can't really dismiss his opinions. And again, I don't think he would have chosen to do any of that. Apply that to every one of the wrestlers that isn't the Clique. And, you know, that's another thing. The Clique kind of dug their heels in on Vince McMahon over the course of 1995, and a lot of things happened that maybe shouldn't have. I'm not going to put it all on them, because ultimately the buck stops with Vince, but we mentioned earlier in 95 about how once Double J Jeff Jarrett left, Dean Douglas stepped in to kind of fill that spot on the card that Jeff Jarrett was filling. Joe, you pointed that out. And if it weren't for the Clique and them being assholes and fucking with Shane Douglas, that could have been really good. gimmick aside, obviously, but we'll never know that because the Clique were pretty much just running roughshod over everything.
Ran them out.
And 95 is the result of that. My highlight, you guys have said it already. It's the seeds that get planted. That's pretty much it. I can't put it any better way than you guys have already. We got the hints of Stone Cold Steve Austin. We got Ahmed Johnson. We got Sonny. We got Chris Candido. We got Henry Godwin. We got, all of these people that are going to come into their own once the creative bullshit gets kind of flushed out of the system. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me on that. Which kind of just leads naturally to what we're looking forward to in 1996, because my goodness, there is a lot to look forward to. Ryan, why don't you go first with that?
Some of the obvious, yes, the seeds of the Attitude Era were planted in 1995, but they take off in 1996. Stone Cold Steve Austin is going to be introduced in the next couple weeks here, followed by one of my all-time favorites, Mankind. I mean, with that, we're finally going to bring a legendary feud for The Undertaker.
Yes.
And this is going to be a point where my fandom really hit a crossroads, because as I've established before, yes, I'm an asshole for The Undertaker, but I am a huge Mick Foley fan. And this feud really tied me in knots. Yes, I knew it was fake back in 96, but I loved both of these guys, and this feud puts me in a tough spot that I love. I love that it could actually do this to me. So that's probably what I'm looking forward to the most is this Undertaker-Mankind feud.
Kind of going off of that is that they really had a lot of balls, and it worked at turning Paul Bearer heel.
Yeah.
When they did that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, obvious big names. Stone Cold Steve Austin. We're going to have to deal with the ringmaster for a little bit, but Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock later in the year.
Yeah, I missed that, yeah.
Yeah, and Mankind, and the Warrior's going to make his return again in 96. That's not something
We'll
that was
see.
great, but yeah, it's something to look forward to. And I want to mention too that this is pre-broken neck Steve Austin. So, we know Steve Austin with his ground attack, his more recent style, but I'm really looking forward to seeing him, before that injury and see how he worked and how different, how much he really did have to change his style. We're going to get more Sonny. Sonny is really, really going to take off in 96. And a couple guys, I guess, smaller names that didn't really make a huge impact, but I'm looking forward to seeing are Mark Marrow and Mark Henry.
Yeah.
Mark Henry, he was a guy that I guess was really bad at first and had to go back to Stu Hart's dungeon to train and all this stuff. So really looking forward to that. But for me, the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to is the man they call Vader.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know his WWF run was very flat, but Vader was one of those guys that when I was a kid and I was watching like WCW Saturday nights, I hated Vader. He was just such a good heel. And that is something that they desperately need right now. So when we talk about people like Mankind and Vader, man, I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's already been mentioned, but I am looking forward the most to Mankind. Mick Foley is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and I'm really looking forward to, first of all, seeing him, but also getting into the real spirit of what we're doing with the podcast here, and really going back and taking a look at some of the old, original Mankind, behaviors and promos and vignettes and the way that he carries himself in the ring, because as time goes on, he gets more and more into his kind of delusional Mick Foley gimmick. So sometimes he's Mankind, sometimes he's Dude Love, sometimes he's Cactus Jack, sometimes he's Mick Foley by himself. And, but this is the original introduction to him.
Him in the corner, rocking, pulling his hair out. I mean, just I can't wait. I can't.
Yeah. And besides that, the thing that I am also looking forward to is And this is something that we've seen hints of as we go through, as we went through 1995. It kind of ramped up towards the end, and we've mentioned it in our episodes of Raw. And like earlier tonight, we talked about it with the camera following Razor from backstage. You know, we go from the interview with Doc Hendricks, and even though it's only a couple seconds, we get that peek behind the scenes. We get the space between the interview set and the entryway set. We get to see the rigging and all of that shit. And we're going to start to get to see more of that. And as we go farther backstage in the WWE, we get better creative. We get more stories that make better sense and that last longer and are more engaging. I'm not saying that everything relies entirely on that, because it doesn't, but it's a couple steps towards those little vignettes that had us popping our asses off as teenagers. You know, somebody saying something backstage and somebody coming up behind them, and that's what gets a feud going. You know, somebody hanging out in the locker room getting their stuff ready for their match and somebody jumps them from behind. The things that we haven't really seen up to this point. And once we do start to get that, that's going to really get the creative juices flowing, and it's going to give us a lot to sink our teeth into, I think.
A lot of pivotal things that happened in 96 behind the scenes, too, that will be interesting to see how they handle it on TV, like the curtain call incident, the NWO forming in WCW, which, you know, obviously both of those things led to Razor and Diesel leaving.
Yeah.
Seeing how they handle that on TV again will be very interesting to see.
Not to mention just, you know, how shocking the quick pace at which it improves. I mean, we're talking about Stone Cold and Mankind here, but Stone Cold's going to be introduced in a couple weeks here. You know, he's almost immediately in 96, he's introduced. And then Mankind, we get his vignettes very shortly after, and he's introduced in the first quarter of 96. So, I mean, we're going to see improvement happen drastically fast here, which is, you know, kind of shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing that I didn't even think of before until you mentioned it there, Joe, is just how much the news segments are probably going to ramp up as the Monday Night Wars really ramp up.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of these guys coming in, like Mankind, you know, like how did he get there? You know, what kind of stuff is going to be in there?
WCW basically saying, we don't got anything for you, fuck off.
Yeah.
Didn't he go to ECW for a little bit? And then, just seeing all that stuff will be interesting again to kind of go back and revisit some of that. But I think 96 is looking to be the complete opposite of 95. I think we're going to have a lot of highlights and very little lowlights.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to 96. I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, same here. Well, that's it, gentlemen. That was 1995. Are you glad it's done?
Oh, I am.
Very much so. Although I gotta say, 95 sucked. For the 90s, it was the worst by far. Yeah. But some of these more recent years of wrestling have been probably a lot worse, or at least close to 95.
It'd be tough for me to give you an opinion on that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it, folks. We are done with 1995. I want to thank you again for joining us. If you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can find us on every major social media and podcast subscription platform by searching up the handle Wrasslin Raw. That's WRASSLINRAW. And just add an @gmail.com to that to hit us up on email. While you're out there in podcast land, don't forget to click subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and let your friends know about the fastest growing wrestling podcast in the world. So, guys, this is the end of 1995, right? We're going into 1996. The next match, or the next Raw, will be the Raw Bowl.
That's right.
January 2nd, 1996. And does anybody want to take a guess as to how we're going to kick off 1996? No? We're going to kick it off with Yokozuna and King Mabel, among many more. Among many more.
Oh. We thought we were going to the promised land.
I couldn't wait to hear your reactions to that. I'm looking forward to checking that out with you and with our listeners. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin' Raw.